Hi, this is my latest literary review, and I have the book Pie Town, published in 2011 by Lynne Hinton. And I've selected this book as my book of the month for December 2013 for a number of reasons. It's a very exciting and interesting account of fiction, and I think that people will enjoy this story. Lynne Hinton is a former English teacher who currently has employment as a minister for the United Church of Christ. And she's living in New Mexico and is considered one of the best new novelists in America, having recently published 13 books, including a national bestseller called Friendship Cake. A little bit about the author. Hinton is a native of New Mexico, and as I mentioned previously, she's a minister, and she came up with the idea of her novel Pie Town, which I have right here. And the idea was to voice her personal experiences as a seminary student preparing for religious life. Now, of course, one of the differences is in her own life, she is married, has a husband, and is one of the few female ministers who is ordained to practice in the United States. And in Pie Town, she tells this fictional account of Father George Morris, a newly ordained Catholic priest who was assigned to be pastor of Pie Town, a fictitious church in New Mexico, with primarily congregants who are Native American Indians. As the story unfolds, Father George completes seminary studies in Ohio, and the Monsignor of the parish assigns him the church in New Mexico known as Pie Town when he's 24 years old, and he graduates in May. Now, the parish is mostly Native American Indians, but they worship as Catholics. And the cast of characters includes Roger, who's a local sheriff, Danny, who's the sheriff's deputy, Father George, who we mentioned is the new minister to the town, Trina, a girl from Texas who hitchhikes and gets a ride with Father George when he first enters the town, Maylene, the ex-wife of Roger the sheriff, Alex, the grandson of Roger and Maylene, who has a form of spina bifida and cerebral palsy, and then Fred and Bee, who are owners of a diner who employ Trina as a waitress. Now for the story. Father George is given a one-year assignment to serve as minister of the place known as Pie Town. And the story is supposed to take place in the early 1990s. And when he visits, he arrives in town in this station wagon with this girl who's 18 years old from Texas, who's a hitchhiker he picked up along the way. He meets the town sheriff, who greets him, and then the town sheriff gives him a ride. It gives him directions to where the church is located and where the house is for the pastor. And then he meets the hitchhiker Trina and offers Trina a job in the local diner, and has them meet Bee and Fred, who are the owners of the diner. And then after having Bee and Fred meet this young girl, then they give her a job as a waitress, and then she also looks for an apartment and a place to stay. And while she's there, she meets Alex, who is the grandson of the sheriff, and the grandson Alex asks if Trina can stay at the house of the sheriff's ex-wife and where the grandson Alex are living, so she stays there. Anyway, here's what happens. After living there for like 6 months or whatever, and learning, meeting the town folks and everything, Father George learns that Trina is pregnant, and he notices that her belly is swollen. And so the town folks accuse Trina of becoming pregnant and having an affair, and then they're wondering if the minister, Father George, is responsible, but they don't say it outright. So then anyway, Trina has this affair with this local football player named Rob Chavez, who's a high school student, and that's supposed to distract the town folks from the minister. And then after this, the minister finds out. He asks Trina to go to confession for her sins. She goes to confession, and now it's like November or December. She lights a candle in confession. Rob Chavez, the football player, drops her off at the confession. So on. She meets with a priest, then goes into the church afterwards by herself, prays for forgiveness, lights a candle. And then wouldn't you know it, the next day the church burns down. So all the people in town are in an uproar, and they blame Trina and Father Morris, and they're planning to ride them out of town. And then Alex comes to the rescue, and he plans a town meeting to explain that it's not their fault, and you know, something happened. And then Rob Chavez, the football player, is supposed to go to the meeting and explain that it was he and his girlfriend Katie who actually lit the fire and caused the church to burn down. So anyway, this is supposed to happen at the town meeting, but instead Alex has a severe bout of pneumonia, is hospitalized, and then he dies in the hospital, and he doesn't go to the town meeting. So then they have the town meeting, and then Rob Chavez and his girlfriend Katie show up, and they explain that they were the real culprits of the fire. And then Father George Morris is forgiven, and then the Monsignor allows him to go back to the church, and then he tries to raise funds to build a new church and all this, and then everything is okay. As far as the story goes, you know, it's really pretty interesting, and while I'm not a fan of stories with religious themes, I think it's pretty good, and it's dramatic and interesting. And what I like is that this Lynne Hinton offers you a reader's guide, and she gives you a list of questions where she explains what you should know as a reader. And so I just wanted to go to the novel and read some of the questions that she lists. Here's her question 1. New Mexico is described as 3 cultures: Native American, Hispanic, and Caucasian. How do the characters in the book represent these cultures? Question 2. Pytown is a very small town. What are advantages to living in a small town, and what are the disadvantages? Question 3. What is the role of the angel Alice in the story, and who needs the angel most? Is it Alex or someone else? Question 4. How would you describe Father George? Were you surprised by his secret? And then question 5, an extra one. At what point of the story did you think Trina might be pregnant? And then what do you think that the town folk treated her fairly? So these are all important questions. And then question 6 is, what is the significance of Pytown in the name of the story? And question 7 is, does Pytown illustrate the idea of community, and how do you define community? So these are all important, and the author gives you help in learning the process. So I thought it was a really excellent book, and so that's why I recommend it.